But why Alex has gone on a mission, I think of people that's going in missions. I think of Wayne Barrier. And the story that always comes to me is a few years ago, Wayne was to come here on a Sunday night like he always does annually. And when he comes here, we normally have an ice cream supper. Well, it turns out that we had Wayne Barrier here, but we had somebody else here, and the ice cream supper didn't happen. So it turned out to become a Mexican supper, and a bunch of us went with Wayne to eat at the Mexican restaurant over here in Rogersville. And if you know Wayne, he goes overseas and mission trips, and he was telling us a story, and this goes along with the missions. He was telling us about this guy in India, P.K. Swami. I don't know if y'all know Swami or not, but he was telling us this story where Swami has been in part of probably 50,000 conversions. That's 50,000. So he's been at this for a while. And one night, Swami had the opportunity to go to this wealthy family's house. And it was set up where he's going to go in. He's going to talk to them about Christ and the gospel. And when he got there and he started talking to them, he could sort of sense that they wasn't really caring what he had to say. And a few minutes, rolled on, and he said, Swami said, this is going nowhere, but he kept on. And at the end of the lesson right there, the family got up and left, and he thought, well, nobody's listening, nobody's paying attention. And little did he know that the people that served this rich family wanted to know more about Christ. So you never know where the opportunity is, in this mission field. We're in a mission field daily, so we need to remember we're always in a mission. But we have people today going to Nicaragua, or should be there by now, and let's keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Well, the subject of my lesson tonight is going to be about David. I know when most people think about David, they think about Goliath. And, when you think of David and Goliath, you always think the 5 stones and the slingshot. But I always, since studying this a lot more and studying David a lot more, you think about a lot of things. You think they suited this man up to go out and battle in this grown man's fatigues. I mean, it weighed too much. And he said, look, I can't do it with this. I have to go with what I know. So this is me doing what I can with what I know. So it starts off in Acts 13. If you would, turn to Acts 13:22. If you know, David was the second king of Israel. The first king was Saul, and Saul was very jealous of David. One of the things that always got at Saul was he'd always hear that he killed or took care of thousands of people, but David took care of 10,000s of people. So it always rubbed him the wrong way, and he was always jealous of David. David was successful in everything he did, a lot of things he did. One of the things that all these victories, he had victory after victory in war. And one of the guys that had a lot of flocks over there, and his name was Nabal. David had 600 men helping Nabal watch over his fields. What happened was at the end of shearing time, or when it became time for the sheep to be sheared, David said, I need my share for my men right here where we can have enough to keep us fed, keep us supplied. And Nabal returned back with the answer, I don't know who you are. So that angered David. And David said, all right. He got word back to him. He says, the message got back to him, not a male will be left when I get done with him. So his wife returned with that message to Nabal the next day. The Bible says his heart or his body turned to stone. He scared a man to death. This is a very powerful man. But we're going to look at certain aspects of David's life. We're going to look at the powerful moments right here. But this man also not only was impressive to, somebody reading this, but people left their own nationality to follow David. There was Philistines, 400 that followed him. Even though they didn't know the God of Israel, they followed David because he was that impressive. But if we read in Acts 13 and 22, and when he had removed him, which is Saul, he raised up for them David as king, to whom also he gave testimony, said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will. Let's think about that. There's not many people that has the notation of being a man after God's own heart. And as we can read here in verse 23, from this man's seed, according to the promise, God raised up for Israel a Savior, Jesus. So he's a very important person. He was not only a great warrior, but he was also a poet and a musician. If you think about what he could do on the out in the war zones or out on the battlefield, he could also write you a nice poem, play you a nice song, write a song for you, and then he could take down as many thousands of people as he wanted to. But if we turn to 2 Samuel, verse 23, as impressive as David is, the men that followed him, when you read about we're just going to read about a few of them tonight, but just reading a few of their accomplishments, you've got to really understand how impressive, if these guys followed him, how impressive David was. Let's start in verse 8 in chapter 23. And when I think of this list right here we're about to read, I think they probably tell this story just like we would like at a campfire or something, or we're sitting around and we're telling stories. I'm sure these stories get told over and over. And these mighty men right here that we're fixing to read about, I'm sure when they're all sitting around and they're talking about their battles, they talk about their victories and what they've done. But let's just read a few verses right here. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had: Joseph, Beshabeth, the Tachmonite, chief among the captains. He was called Adino the Eznite because he had killed 800 men at one time. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the three mighty men with David. When defied the Philistines who had gathered there for battle, the men of Israel had retreated, and he arose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand stuck to the sword. The Lord had brought about a great victory that day, and the people returned to him only to plunder. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody have rider's cramp, but this man had sword hand fighting cramps, where his hand literally froze to the sword, fighting for David. And after him was Shema, the son of Agi the Harahite. The Philistines had gathered him together in a troop where there was a piece of ground full of lentils, so the people fled from the Philistines. But he stationed himself in the middle of the field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Then 3 of the 30 chief men went down at the harvest time and came to David at the cave of Adullam. And the troops of the Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was in Bethlehem. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." Now, he said this not as a command. He was just saying this sort of in passing. But 3 men heard this, and we'll read in verse 16. So the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem, which was by the gate, and took it by and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink it, but he poured it out to the Lord. They went inside this camp in front of all these people. Now, they may have to fight their way out. We don't know. It didn't say specifically what had to happen to go in there. But they went in just because they wanted to please David. Now, their lives were at risk, but that was what they was willing to do. That's honor. And he would not drink it because that would be an abomination to God, that they honored him so much. So the respect they had for David, as you can see, just by him saying something in passing, they were willing to do it. And he said, "Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is this not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives?" Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the three mighty men. Now Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of another three. He lifted his spear against 300 men and killed them, and won a name among these three. But he was not the most honored of the three. Therefore he became their captain. However, he did not attain to the first three. Then Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. And I don't know right here what two lion-like men look like, but it says he had killed two lion-like heroes from Moab. He had also gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. He went down. Now, just imagine going over to UNA and wrestling with Mike the Tiger for a while, or Una. Nobody would get in there with a lion for nothing. This man went into a pit on a snowy day, slipping and sliding. He went in and wore it out. Now, these are the kind of men David had in his army. And as impressive as they are, there's two other verses right here and 11 other people I want to talk about. Just to tell you how great an army he had. In 1 Chronicles, if we'll turn there, it's sort of a parallel list. There's some more names added in 1 Chronicles. In 1 Chronicles 12, verse 8, some Gadites joined David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty men of valor, men trained for battle, who could handle shield and spear, whose faces were like lions and were as swift as gazelles on the mountains. Again, you go back to their faces were like lions and they were as swift as gazelles. It also says, if you skip down to verse 14, they were sons of Gad, captains of the army. The least was over 100 and the greatest was over 1,000. You had one man that was worth 100 men, and you had the best one was worth 1,000 men. They said these 11 could go out into battle by themselves. It also said that they crossed the Jordan when it was flooding. We're going to read here later on. They went to battle when the flood stopped, but these men could go before the battle started. So, very impressive people. But then you got one more person I was wanting to look at. In 2 Samuel 23 and 39, you'll see it says Uriah the Hittite. I imagine when they're sitting around there talking to each other about this day, Uriah's name gets mentioned. It reminds David of one of the worst days of his life, one of the worst times of his life. I would imagine he got up real quick and said, "I've had enough of this, I'm leaving." And we don't understand sometimes just exactly when you got a men that are capable of killing 1,000 people, all these people sitting around talking to each other, and this one man's sitting there and said, "I've had enough." It upsets him, but why does it upset him? And we're going to find out here, and we're going to talk about it. If you would, turn to 2 Samuel 11. The Bible writer starts it out in the New King James Version with the word "it." It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. We can already see this is bad because David was king. David should have been with his men. David goes on to make more mistakes, as we're fixing to read. Then it happened one evening. It happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about the woman. Someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" He got told twice. This is not only a daughter of one of your mighty men, this is the wife of one of your mighty men, two of his people. And I can see that by reading this, he wasn't where he was supposed to be. He was idle in what he was doing. He got up and walked around, and she may have not, should have been out on the roof while he could have seen her during the day. But it was David who initiated all this. And they tried to warn him, she's married. That's one of your captain's daughters. But then David sent messengers in verse 4 and took her. And she came to him, and he lay with her. For she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. And then the woman conceived. So she went and told David and said, "I am with child." David has committed a bunch of sin. David is going to try now to cover up his sins. And you notice that we've not mentioned the Lord, how we brought great victories in the other conversations, but now the Lord's not here with him. The Lord's not discussing this with him yet. So let's read in verse 5 or verse 6. Then David sent to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite," and Joab sent Uriah to David. The penalty back then, if this was to be found out, it's not like today where they get a divorce. It was death. Death for both of them. So David knew the penalty was high. So he's going to try to cover it up. So when Uriah had come to him, David's going to say, "Hey, how's the war going? How's Joab doing? How's everything going? Glad to see you. Why don't you go see your wife Bathsheba?" Well, that would be very good, wouldn't it? Everything gets covered up, all the mistakes are forgiven. That's not what's going to happen. Let's read. But David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah departed from the king's house, and a gift of food from the king followed him. So when they told David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house," David said to Uriah, "Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." David was the king. Uriah was a soldier. Uriah had more honor right now than David did. He was worried about the people out in the field. He was not concerned with doing anything to help David with his situation. So David's thinking and his thought patterns are not getting him nowhere right now. So he said, "Well, all right, Uriah, just wait here today, and tomorrow I'll let you depart." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now when David called him, he come back. He ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And that day evening he went out to lie in his bed and with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. He still had enough honor while he was drunk to not go in that house with Bathsheba, because he had one thing on his mind, that was being where he was supposed to be. And he wrote a letter. David said, "Well, this has got to end one way or another. I've got to make this look good for me." That's basically what's going to happen. And what the letter he wrote, more or less, was his marching orders to kill Uriah. Now, could you imagine somebody let's just say I hand Terrell a letter and hand it, say go hand it to Johnny and tell Johnny to get yourself killed. That's what David did. He sent Uriah a letter to Joab, said put him in the hottest battle and get him killed. I want him dead. So let's read down the rest of the story. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war. And he wrote the letter saying, send Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him, and he may be struck down and die. So it was, while Joab besieged the city, he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew the men were valiant. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died. Things are good for David. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, when you have finished telling these matters of the war to the king, if it happens, the king's wrath arises, you tell him, why, if he asks, why did you approach so near to the city when you fought? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck Abimelech, the son of Jerusalem? Was it not a woman who cast a piece of millstone on him from the wall, so he died in Thebez? Why did you go near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. He knew what David was capable of if his anger, raged. And he says, look, to save your life, tell him Uriah is dead. So the messenger went and came and told Joab, told David all that Joab sent by him. And the messenger said to David, surely the men prevailed against us and came out into the field. Then we drove them back as far as the entrance of the gate. The archers shot from the wall at your servants, and some of the king's servants are dead. And your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this displease you, for the sword devours one as well as another. Strengthen your attack against the city, overthrow it. So encourage him. Wasn't mad. When Uriah, the wife of Uriah, heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done had displeased the Lord. David thought he'd got away with it. David had thought, well, we've got rid of the penalty part because no one's going to know. And I think that's a lot of times we have to look out for ourselves. Is we can think that no one sees our sin, but really the only one that matters that can see our sin is God. But God did see his sin. And if we look in the next chapter right here, it really comes to light, and it really hits David what it was that his problem was. In verse 1 of chapter 12, then the Lord sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said, there were two men in one city, one rich and one poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb which he had brought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and with his children. It ate of his own food and drank of his own cup and lay in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man who refused to take from his own flock, from his own herd, and prepare for one wayfaring man who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. So David's anger was greatly aroused against the man. He said to David, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this shall surely die. David had no clue that Nathan was talking about him. Imagine when David is angered, what he's capable of. But then Nathan hits him with the truth. And he shall restore fourfold for the lamb because he did this thing, because he had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. Not as, you're the man. You're the man that did this. Thus saith the Lord of God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered your hand from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your keeping. And I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that would have been too little, I'd have gave you much more. David, if he had just asked for it, God would have provided it for him. But David got restless one night. He saw something he wanted. They told him he couldn't have it. He shouldn't get it. He took it anyway and created a mess that he couldn't unravel. In verse 9, he says, Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord, to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with a sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife. You have killed him with a sword of the people of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me. You have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, Behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. David's starting to realize things are not going the way he thought they were. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, The Lord has put away your sin, you shall not die. I think that's one of the better things for us in this lesson. God's forgiveness was immediate to David. And when we ask for forgiveness from God, it is immediate. But as a result of this, David wrote a psalm, Psalm 51. And if you would turn to Psalms 51, and we're going to read and start at verse 10. David realized it was a heart issue that he had. A lot of times we don't understand what our heart controls. I think we all can see that idleness is a condition of the heart. But when we're motivated for God and we're doing things for God, it's not as hard when we're idle. Because when we're idle, we can see things that come to us and they look pleasing to us. But if we were in God's service, they wouldn't be as we wouldn't want them as bad as we do now. Or I can't think of the word right now, but anyway, Psalms 51, starting verse 10. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence. Do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore me to the joy of your salvation. Uphold me by your generous spirit. Then I will teach your transgressors your ways, and your sinners shall be converted to you. Deliver me from the guilt of bloodshed, O God, the God of my salvation, and my tongue shall sing aloud of your righteousness. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall show forth your praise. For you do not desire sacrifice, or else I would give it. You did not delight in burnt offering. See, this is still before Christ, and there was sacrifices that had to be given. And David realized that there was nothing he could do to sacrifice, because God did not want that right there. So, a few things as we're closing today. Not be idle in what you do. Pursue God. Pursue the right things in your life. David's greatest sin, he killed Uriah. But his greatest sin was he was idle. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. He wasn't doing the things God asked him to do. And even though he was forgiven, there were consequences. The child that was conceived with Bathsheba died. He prayed fervently for that child before it was born, hoping that God would change his mind. But God did not change his mind. And when he got up, the men were sort of puzzled, why are you eating now since the child's died? He says, well, I can't do nothing about it now. It's over. So David, which is a warrior among warriors, and had men that loved him like no other. We can have people that look up to us and are inspired by us, but we got to remember who inspires us. We've got to be motivated for God. And if your motivation is not for God, what is it for?